If you like this kind of chilling tale, click the like button and subscribe to Nightmare Narratives for more true horror stories. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more terrifying content. Get scared and we'll see you in the next video. I've always been drawn to unusual and obscure pieces of art. Perhaps it was my fascination with the stories they carried, or maybe it was just the eerie beauty that captivated me. But there was one painting that I would soon regret ever coming across, a painting that would change my life forever. I first encountered the crying boy at an antique shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. The place smelled of dust and old wood, and the dim lighting gave everything a sinister glow. The painting caught my eye immediately. It was a portrait of a young boy, maybe around 6 or 7 years old, with large, sorrowful eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. His cheeks were streaked with tears, and his expression was one of deep sadness. There was something about the painting that sent a shiver down my spine, but at the same time, I felt an inexplicable urge to possess it. The shopkeeper noticed my interest and approached me with a wary look. "That painting has a dark history," he said in a low voice. "People say it's cursed. Those who own it have suffered terrible misfortunes, fires, accidents, even deaths. Are you sure you want to take it home?" I laughed it off, dismissing his warnings as mere superstition. After all, I didn't believe in curses. I was a rational person, and the idea that a painting could bring bad luck seemed ridiculous. But there was a part of me, deep down, that felt uneasy. Still, I decided to buy it. It was just a painting, after all. What harm could it possibly do? As I left the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that the boy's eyes were following me. I told myself it was just my imagination, but even after I got home and hung the painting on my living room wall, the unease lingered. The house felt colder, and shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual. I started to hear faint whispers at night, whispers that seemed to be coming from the direction of the painting. But I ignored them, telling myself it was all in my head. Little did I know, those whispers were just the beginning. It wasn't long after I brought the painting home that the strange occurrences began. At first, they were subtle, barely noticeable. Lights would flicker for no reason, and there was a constant chill in the air, no matter how high I turned up the heat. But I chalked it up to an old house and faulty wiring. I didn't want to admit that something more sinister might be at play. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, the room grew colder than usual. I glanced at the painting, and for a moment, I could have sworn the boy's expression had changed. His sorrowful eyes seemed to be pleading, begging for something I couldn't understand. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a trick of the light. But then, the unthinkable happened. It was late at night, and I was in bed when I smelled smoke. My heart raced as I jumped up and ran into the hallway, only to be greeted by thick, black smoke seeping from under the living room door. Panic surged through me as I threw open the door, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The entire living room was engulfed in flames, except for the wall where the crying boy hung. The fire roared around it, but the painting remained untouched, as if some invisible force was protecting it. I could feel the heat on my skin, hear the crackling of the flames, but my eyes were locked on that painting. The boy's expression had changed again. No longer sad, he now wore a cruel smile, a smile that seemed to mock me as my world burned around him. I managed to escape the house before the fire consumed everything. The fire department arrived, but it was too late. The house was destroyed. As I stood there, watching the remnants of my home smoldering, a firefighter approached me. He held something in his hands, something that had somehow survived the blaze. It was the crying boy. The painting was completely unscathed, not a single burn mark on it. The firefighter looked at me with a mixture of confusion and fear, but all I could do was stare at the painting, now more certain than ever that it was cursed. That night, I realized the terrible truth. The painting was not just a piece of art. It was something much darker, something that had marked me for reasons I could not yet comprehend. And I knew that as long as the painting existed, I would never be safe. I wasn't a believer in the supernatural. As a paranormal investigator, my job was to debunk myths, to find logical explanations for the so-called hauntings and curses that frighten people out of their wits. So, when I heard about the crying boy painting and its alleged curse, I was intrigued, but not scared. I decided to acquire the painting myself, confident that I could prove once and for all that it was nothing more than an old, tragic piece of art. From the moment the painting entered my home, however, I began to notice strange things. It started small. A door that I was certain I had closed would be open when I returned, or the lights in my study would flicker even though I had just replaced the bulbs. At first, I dismissed these incidents as coincidences. But soon, they became harder to ignore. One night, I was reviewing some case files in my study when I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping. It seemed to come from the direction of the painting. The sound was faint, almost like someone gently knocking on a door. I walked over to the painting and examined it closely, but there was nothing unusual, just the boy's sad eyes staring back at me. The tapping stopped as soon as I approached, and I shrugged it off, attributing it to the old house settling. But the tapping returned the next night. And the next. It became more insistent, more demanding. I could feel the unease growing inside me, but I refused to let fear take hold. I decided to set up cameras around the painting, determined to catch whatever was causing the disturbances. For the first few nights, the footage showed nothing out of the ordinary. But on the fourth night, I saw it, clear as day. The boy's eyes moved. I replayed the footage over and over, unable to believe what I was seeing. The boy's eyes, once fixed in a sorrowful gaze, slowly shifted to the side, as if watching something move across the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to rationalize it, but there was no denying what I had witnessed. The tapping grew louder, now accompanied by whispers, soft, unintelligible whispers that seemed to come from all directions. They grew more persistent, more desperate, and I could no longer ignore the dread that had taken root in my gut. I was no longer in control of the situation, something else was. One night, the whispers escalated into a full-blown nightmare. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing as if I had just run a marathon. In my dream, the boy from the painting had come to life. He stood at the foot of my bed, his eyes dark and hollow, his face twisted into a terrifying grin. He didn't speak, but I could feel his hatred, his malice, seeping into my soul. I tried to move, to scream, but I was paralyzed, trapped in my own body. When I finally woke up, the first thing I saw was the painting. It had somehow moved from my study to my bedroom, and the boy's eyes were fixed on me with a malevolence I had never seen before. I knew then that I had made a grave mistake. This was no ordinary painting, and I was in way over my head. Desperate to understand the painting's true nature, I reached out to a team of paranormal experts. I thought that with their help, we might be able to unravel the mystery behind the crying boy and put an end to the terror it had brought into my life. We set up a thorough investigation, complete with equipment to measure electromagnetic fields, thermal cameras, and voice recorders. The team arrived at my house, and their presence was a mix of excitement and apprehension. We began our investigation in the living room, where the painting hung, and immediately started setting up equipment. The atmosphere in the house felt charged, almost electric, and everyone could sense that something was off. As the night wore on, we noticed strange readings on the equipment. Electromagnetic fields were spiking in areas close to the painting, and the thermal cameras showed cold spots that seemed to move around the room. But the most disturbing evidence came from the voice recorders. We picked up a series of chilling, incoherent whispers that seemed to be coming from the painting itself. One of the investigators, Emma, decided to conduct a seance to try and communicate with whatever was causing the disturbances. We gathered in a circle, holding hands, and Emma began to ask questions. The room grew colder, and the whispers on the recorders became louder and more frantic. Then, as if the room itself was alive, the lights flickered violently, and a deep, guttural growl echoed through the house. We could see the painting's eyes move on the thermal camera, shifting rapidly as if they were watching us with malicious intent. Emma suddenly gasped and collapsed, her face contorted in fear. The other members of the team rushed to her side, but it was too late. The room was now filled with an oppressive darkness, and the temperature dropped so low that we could see our breath. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread, and the whispers had turned into anguished wails. One by one, the team members fell victim to the malevolent force. Some were found unconscious, others seemed to have vanished without a trace. The once calm and rational investigators were now reduced to panic and chaos. I tried to help, but I could barely move through the thickening fog of terror. By dawn, only I remained. The house was eerily silent, the once energetic atmosphere now replaced by a haunting stillness. The painting, still hanging on the wall, was now devoid of any emotion. The boy's eyes seemed empty, as if he had drained the life out of everyone who had dared to confront him. In the aftermath, the paranormal team was never seen again. Their disappearance was a mystery that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The painting had claimed them, just as it had claimed so many others before. I was left alone with the cursed artwork, more certain than ever that there was no escaping its malevolent grip. I was the last one left, and the weight of the painting's curse was almost unbearable. The once lively house was now a chilling mausoleum of silence and dread. My breath came out in visible puffs as I made my way through the cold, dark rooms, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me. I knew I had to do something, anything, to escape the nightmare. I stumbled back to the living room, where the painting hung in its sinister glory. The boy's eyes seemed to follow my every move, an unspoken threat in their empty, sorrowful gaze. I tried to think clearly, to find a logical solution to my predicament, but fear was clouding my mind. I realized that the only way to break the curse might be to destroy the painting, but a part of me hesitated. The idea of confronting the painting directly filled me with terror, but I couldn't let that stop me. I grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and prepared to smash the cursed artwork. As I raised the poker, the house seemed to react violently. The walls trembled, and a low, growling sound filled the air. The temperature dropped further, and the whispers grew into a deafening roar. The boy's eyes seemed to glow with a malevolent light, as if they were daring me to strike. With all my strength, I swung the poker at the painting. It connected with the frame, and a sharp crack echoed through the room. The painting's surface shattered, and I could feel a surge of energy, a fierce resistance trying to pull me back. The room was filled with an intense, blinding light, and for a moment, I lost all sense of time and space. When the light subsided, I found myself outside, lying on the front lawn. My heart was racing, and I was drenched in sweat. The house loomed behind me, its windows dark and lifeless. I could hear the whispers again, but they were distant, fading away as if the house was releasing me from its grip. I got up, my legs trembling, and looked back at the house one last time. It was as if the curse had been lifted, but I knew better. The painting had been destroyed, but the darkness it had spread would never fully leave me. I had escaped, but I was forever changed by the encounter. I walked away, knowing that I would never return. The house was no longer a place of terror for me, but I couldn't forget the horrors I had witnessed. The curse of the crying boy had claimed its victims, and I had been lucky to escape with my life.